The LNRA is mainly made up of local users of the lake. The organization's first achievement, for which it was awarded the Ramsar Prize in 1998, was to reconcile the many demands on the water with the lake's international value to wildlife. And that too is a use through fisheries, recreation and tourism. It achieved this by bringing all the users around a table to discuss their one interest in common, the sustainable future of the lake. By far the largest human use of the lake, in terms of both lakeside land and dollar earnings, is the growth of flowers and vegetables under irrigation. Naivasha is now the center of Kenya's horticultural industry, itself one of the country's top 3 export earners. The horticultural industry is relatively new, about 30 years old. For longer, the lake has supported a commercial gillnet fishery. And for longer still, it's been a tourist and recreational destination. Kenyans and foreigners alike come to enjoy the wildlife, the fishing and the tranquility, a relaxing contrast from a hectic urban lifestyle. Here, one can view the wildlife close up on boat excursions from local hotels and guest houses. A significant contributor to both the commercial fishery and the tourist appeal of the lake is a great sport fish, the American large-mouthed bass. This species, as its name implies, is not a native of Kenya or even to Africa, but it's an exotic, the name given to a species introduced by man outside its natural range. The bass was brought to Naivasha in about 1925 after the state visit of US President Roosevelt, himself a keen fisherman who recommended it. And this exotic, although responsible for the demise of Naivasha's only endemic species of fish in the 1960s, a small freshwater sardine, has found a place in the lake's food web. It helps to sustain a population of the majestic African fish eagle, the emblem of the LNRA.
Of course, I wasn't ready either.
A little present to the feathered fisherman. That bass was the first of many. Lake Naivasha is now the exotic capital of the natural world. Others later in the 20th century have been accidental or careless introductions. The LNRA is active in monitoring the spread of these, in highlighting their dangers and in promoting their control. The first was the koipu, a South American mammal once prized for its fur. He found his way here when a fur farm on the slopes of Mount Kenya failed in the 1950s and the owner just opened the gates. For a few years, koipu dined out on the dense water lily beds in the 1970s before it naturally declined to near extinction a decade later. The next arrival, a small South American floating fern called Salvinia, found its way into the lake in the 1960s. It was spread around the world by man because of its attractiveness in garden ponds. And this lake, as many others, it was a disaster for about 20 years, forming extensive floating mats, disrupting fishing and boating. It was brought under biological control in the 1990s by the combination of a natural weevil introduced from its home country and lake level decline, which stranded it. The biggest disaster of all came next, the Louisiana crayfish, and this was deliberately introduced as an additional exploitable species in the fishery in 1970. It was a success for about 8 years. By then, it had quite literally eaten itself out of house and home. Its population crashed in the mid-80s, leaving not a single blade of native greenery in or on the lake, and many of the smaller invertebrates that depend on plants had disappeared too. By the beginning of the new millennium, the crayfish existed in an uneasy relationship with yet another exotic, the water hyacinth. Its beauty, like that of the Salvinia, had led it around the tropical world in the 20th century from its original home in the Amazon basin. Crayfish, surprisingly, didn't eat it, but sheltered in the thick mats that it formed from their main predators of fish eagle and bass. The hyacinth, and through that the crayfish, have now been brought under some kind of control by the success of yet another exotic biological control agent, a weevil from South America. And this was introduced in 1995 by the Kenya Agricultural Research Institute. By 2001, it had reached a high enough density that the hyacinth plants became small and weak, putting an end to the mats and making crayfish accessible to predators again. You might have thought that this would give the lake a breather from the relentless onslaught of exotics, but no such luck. The high rains of 1998-99, associated with El Niño in the Pacific, flooded the rivers and brought down another unexpected guest from a fish farm in the catchment, the common carp. And carp is now the dominant species in the commercial fishery, but a danger. It makes lakes more cloudy because of its habit of grubbing in the bottom for food. In Naivasha, it's likely to make the negative impact of crayfish even worse. Loss of plants that germinate from the sediment and of the insect life that lives upon them. Once again, this highlights the need for constant vigilance by the LNRA to understand what is happening in our lake.